Hey, so there are a lot of well meaning people out there who don't really get trans people and they don't know what to think and they've heard a lot of things. And I used to be one of these people. I did. Even as recent as like 5 years ago, I wasn't quite as accepting. I didn't go out and try to take their rights away, but, in my own little mind. And I was just like, well, I've heard so many things and, it doesn't affect your day to day. So you don't really formulate an opinion on it. But we can't let other people make these decisions for us and have their propaganda affect us and have us make an emotional knee jerk reactions like they like to do. That's how it's very easy to control people whenever you are controlling their emotions or their faith. And Jesus never spoke out about drag queens. He never spoke out about, there was definitely, hermaphroditic, is that the way to say it? People, there's been people like that throughout history. And there was gay people. There was even abortions back then. Yet Jesus never talked about any of it. In fact, God gave us free will for a reason. So why would we try to take away others' free will when even God, the most powerful being ever, that ever has ever existed, omnipotent, omnipotent, the whole thing doesn't take our rights away. Why would Christians think that? And I think that Christians don't think and they don't listen to Jesus' actual words in the Bible telling them, test your leaders. Make sure they're following scripture, not just by what they say, but by their actions and what they do. And the Bible and Jesus predicted that this would happen. They knew, Jesus was constantly getting exasperated with his followers because they were doing the same thing they always do, not listening and going back to their, dumb, pretty much dumb nature. And that's what we do if we do not commit to learning about issues and getting better as a society. Okay? It's like you are morally obligated to become better than the environment that got you here. So specifically, I want to raise the point about this in regards to drag queens versus the church. Now, I was raised Catholic. I'm still a Jesus follower, but I don't, just a disclaimer here, I do not identify as Christian anymore. My personal opinion is that Christianity is a perversion of Jesus's actual teachings. Jesus was not himself a Christian. He never had that term. That term was Greco, was Greek. It's a Greek term. The Greco-Romans, they're the ones who helped, with the help of Paul and over, centuries and decades and whatnot, it morphed into something completely different. So let's go back to the drag queens here before I get off on too much of a tangent. There's been concern, with drag queens. You've probably heard the stories. Oh, these fringe events, become forefront in people's minds. They promote things, and who knows, false flag actors. Why, if you were going to have people, false flag actors, if you were going to claim there's false flag actors at killings and things like that, why would you not think there's false flag actors within the LGBTQ community that are getting people to say, hey, look at us, we're doing bad things. And then people, again, with maybe very well-meaning ideals and beliefs, going down that rabbit hole of being anti-trans, anti-gay, anti-drag queen, just because of these fringe events we've heard. And we can't look at those when we're formulating our opinion of the whole, because trans kids are dying. Trans people are dying. Suicide, murder rates are so much higher than the rest of the population. And these are real people. We have to understand, regardless of whether your beliefs on, oh, maybe transgenderism is increasing now because of the plastics or because of this, or, even if you do believe that you can just create trans people by teaching them about other trans people and that's just infectious by information, which is just ignorant to me to believe. And if it were, I think I've done a video on that kind of before, so I won't go into that. It's ridiculous. But even if that were true, they're still people, they're still actual people. And approaching them with hate and throwing nothing but hate at them, as we've seen with the school board and the people who were involved, the administrators in the Next Benedict case, who are absolutely should be held accountable for this. You are hurting kids every time you speak out against trans people. They are people first and foremost, and we need to remember that. We have more in common with trans people than you do with billionaires. So let's focus, okay? But down to the nitty gritty here, and this is the real, the real important part about it is drag queens are not committing crimes or especially child sexual abuse in any more and probably less. I didn't do a lot of research into this, but I'm just sharing with you, and you can fact check on your own. Please do. They do not do these type of crimes, and there's been no studies that show that they do these crimes against children in any greater amount, and especially when you compare them to the church, which we'll get to in a minute. Instances of sexual abuse by drag queens and transgender people is actually very, very rare. In fact, my personal theory is that it's when you suppress your feelings, your natural feelings of either being gay or being transgendered, when you deny your true reality of your true self and you live in this false self, that's when you start to project against other people for living their true and authentic self. So we really need to check ourselves. If you've watched any of my old videos, you know it's always about within. Within is your basis for everything without. So even Drag Queen Story Hour, kids aren't getting abused. They're learning about literacy and diversity and acceptance. And these are things that Jesus promoted as well. So again, check yourself before you wreck yourself and wreck the whole country while you're at it. So yes, very rare. People are doing these things with good intentions. They may believe different things and they may value different things, but they're not doing crimes and they're not, sexually abusing children. It's just not happening. There's no evidence. And again, you look at other demographics out there, you will see rises and people that like white males, for example, like rich white males, like Christian white males, far right Christian white males. These are really the demographics that are actually doing a higher percentage of child sexual crimes. Okay, there are websites that track these things. There's, the mainstream media doesn't like to promote it because, there's a lot of ties between Christianity, unfortunately, politics, and corporations in this country because of Citizens United and us just allowing the corporations to run everything, which we need to repeal Citizens United and have ranked choice voting. But that's beside the point. Again, trying not to get in too much of a rant here, but there's no evidence whatsoever. In fact, again, the evidence is opposite. It's kind of like the migrant issue. The migrants want to stay so much that they behave themselves overall, and they actually do less crime than the general population. Again, white males are the majority of the school shooters, are the majority of, a lot of crimes. And we would do well to remember that as a society and it's like know your enemy. You got to know your enemy to fight your enemy. So know your enemy in this situation. Now, of course, critics will say, well, these drag queens are exposing them to adult themes. And it's like the same people are putting their kids in skimpy gear and having them dance around, humping the floor and whatnot, humping the air whenever they're doing dance classes and whatnot, performing in skimpy clothing in front of hundreds of people. But yet drag queens are the one that are exposing children to adult themes, when honestly, they're probably reading a book that might talk about diversity, yada, 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 but probably the kids goes completely over their head as to what is actually going on. They're probably just thinking this is a dressed up woman. Like, they're not to that level, especially at that young of an age. So it's not that inappropriate, the things that you see. It's just not that inappropriate. And here's the thing too, when you talk, I've always thought about our media and our society values violence so much. We'll let kids watch violence. Even the cartoons are violent, always have been. But yet two people of an undisclosed gender kissing each other is just mind-boggling for some people. It's love, people. Wouldn't you rather your kid be in love than go murder people with guns? Like, I just don't get it. Where are our true priorities here, And people also say, people just don't value diversity. They just think that, let's get our country back to the way it used to be. Well, the way it used to be wasn't very good for Black people, wasn't very good for women. So when you say make America great again, let's talk about exactly what the F you mean, because might have been greater, a little bit better for white males who want to rule everything and not have to deal with consequences of the things that they say and do, because that's really what this cancel culture and wokeness is about. It's about white men feeling threatened because, wow, now other people, other genders, other races would like to be part of the Congress and maybe be president, and they don't like that. That's getting a piece of their pie. So while concerns exist, and it's always a very serious subject, I'm not saying there's no transgender people that do any crimes or whatever, but it's crucial to separate legitimate concerns with unfounded fears and fear mongering and using that for political gain, because people are playing up on fears, ignorance, and hatred, and they are using that to promote their agenda and to make money off of people who don't use their brain and critical thinking. So now let's move on and talk about sexual abuse within Christian institutions. I mean, obviously the first thing that comes to mind is Catholics, right? But I think they sort of get this, since they're more of a consolidated organization and it's been going on for so long, and for whatever reason, that's what people know about the most. We've all heard of it, not only the sexual scandals, but also it going down through the actual organization, the cover-ups and whatnot. The Catholic Church has grappled with this for a long time, and it's been proven there's widespread sexual abuse involving priests and minors over several decades, at least. There's been massive cover-ups, insufficient, sympathy and empathy for victims, and it's really a systemic issue that, yes, we need to look at, and it has significantly damaged the church's credibility, but yet you have people getting all worked up over something completely unfounded like Pizzagate. And I will tell you, when I was about 20 years old, about 20 years ago or more, 25 years ago, I got into a big argument with my mom, God bless her soul, rest in peace. She was like, Claire, what are you thinking? This is stupid. And she was right. And I was a radical young kid and I didn't understand, and I realized slowly, okay, there's not enough evidence, and I slowly backed away and distanced myself from it. But why are we so, certain people and certain groups more likely to focus on that and oh, there's this vast conspiracy there, when there's obvious and blatant conspiracies that have already been proven, and yet the Catholic Church still operates. These people have not been held accountable. And again, this is not just the Catholic Church, okay? The perpetrators are not being held accountable. It's kind of like, usually when a cop does something wrong, they get maybe a little slap on the wrist, maybe a little demotion, maybe let's move them around to a different state or a different part of the organization. And it's horrific. And, we're continuing to uncover cases, investigations popping up, and continuing to work on holding these people accountable. But the Baptists really also have a problem with this themselves. The SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention, is America's largest Protestant denomination, and they have recently faced allegations of their own. And it's not just, a couple here and there. This is widespread, not only, accusations, but the evidence of cover-ups. And again, evidence building every single week. I think, in fact, last week there was at least 3 in 1 week clergy members, and Christians that were pastors and whatnot that were charged with, sexual crimes with minors. So big problems. And again, the repression is huge, and we need to account for that. When you repress your natural, urges, and we have to understand everything's on a spectrum here. So you never, 0% versus 100%. It's always a spectrum. We're a little bit of everything. That's how we're connected. That's how we're all here in this reality. I digress. But yeah, hundreds of clergy and staff in this organization were accused of abuse over the past 20 years. And the justice has been severely inadequate. And that should be the outrage. Actually proven, actually studied, actually, having evidence for things. And especially not only the crimes, but again, the cover-ups is where, if we actually were paying attention, if we weren't just being hoodwinked. And we have to understand too that a lot of these organizations, you have people like Trump who are talking so much, oh, we're going to save the children was a few years ago was a big thing. It's doublespeak. We need to understand that everything is either projection or they're really actually, it's a political term, saying the opposite with doublespeak, saying the opposite of what they mean. Because if you're saying something and your political rivals just come back and say the same thing to you, it makes them seem incredible. So getting out on the offensive and doing that doublespeak is a real tactic that I think we really need to wrap our heads around as a society. So it should be really, really up in our faces. It should be on the forefront of our minds and our conversations and our focus that we're dealing with this clear and present, inadequate injustice rather than some far-fetched, unproven, no evidence conspiracy theories that have been floating around the past few years. The cover-ups are unreal, and the truth will come out in the end. And the fact is, I would feel much safer taking my kids to a drag queen babysitter than an average member of an average Christian church. They don't have, especially all of these ones that are like preaching far right and these extremists that are so far away from what Christianity is truly about. In fact, they are the ones that are the wolves in sheep clothing that Jesus actually warned us about, who talk a good talk, but then they don't follow through with their actions, and you can tell by the fruit. You can tell by the fruit. So it's just unbelievable. And it doesn't even stop there. The United Methodist Church, what do you know? Why is it this clear pattern? United Methodist Church has their own experiences with this. They experienced a schism over same-sex marriage and LGBTQ clergy. About 53% of delegates voted to maintain bans on these practices, disappointing centrist and liberals. And it's just alienating to anyone. I mean, these churches are supposed to be welcoming people in, trying to raise their numbers, but yet they're shunning people who either may be confused or unsure or really just understand that they are, transgender or gay. So sexual abuse within Christian institutions is a huge problem. It's causing immense pain. People that we know are affected. In fact, one of the cases that I just mentioned within the past week was in my home state. And I still know so many people. It's still so common for people. And you get pressured into like, oh, everybody else in my work, goes to church, and which Christian church should I join? But let's use our critical thinking skills. And instead of joining churches that teach hate and that promote genocide and other things, we need to really look into listening to the victims, paying attention to the facts, being objective, and holding people accountable, promoting transparency, and supporting the victims. It's a very complex issue, but I also think it's not as complex as, like I said, if the media were to actually be promoting, when these Christians are having these issues, you just never see it. They don't promote it because, again, it's against their interest. They have shareholders, not only stockholders, they have sponsors, and they also have to worry about their views. And, to some extent, a little controversy is good, but when things like that happen, again, there's a lot of other factors to consider when it's down to the money and the power and the establishment and the status quo. So yes, it's a complex issue, but when you look at it, it's really not all that complex. It's a matter of having an open heart and an open mind and going from there. So we need to lead with compassion, and we need to believe and lead and follow through with justice and start getting preventative measures, and not letting your kids alone with white males is probably a good idea, especially if they're involved in the church. Just saying. It's facts. Have a good day.